Thanks everybody for coming to practice today. It's very exciting to be back at Pulsation, and I've been thinking about the theme of this class being that this is just weird times that we're living through, and it's sort of thrown us off of our routines and kind of thrown us a little bit out of balance. And so I wanted to create a class about coming into balance. And the coming into balance is very different from being in balance. There's that sense that you have to, it takes a sense of strength to bring yourself into balance from the inside out. Whereas maybe it's easier to bring the body physically to balance your weight, but to balance yourself and your mind and to be calm and present and aware throughout your practice it's a powerful thing that we can take with us after our practice, that can stick with us throughout our week. And that's something that's a kind of a theme that I want to kind of meditate on for a moment in the beginning of this practice, that we can start just with our breath meditation. Start breathing and being aware of each breath that we're breathing. And when you meditate, there's a part of the mind that becomes very concentrated on whether it's your breath or the form of the pose. We're starting with breath, and we're going to move that into the form of the poses. But there's one part of the mind that's concentrated, and then there's another part of the mind that's observing that process of what's going on and what's happening. What does this breath of air feel like? What does this pose feel like? And then there's another part of the mind that's putting in the effort. And that's the side that's like every time we get distracted, we lose the breath, we lose our form. That's the side that reminds us to come back into it, that keep the spine straight, that reminds us to kind of be aware of where we are and who we are and exactly what is happening in the body in this moment while we're here. And so that effort is kind of the fundamental key towards finding a sense of balance, and that effort is almost like the tension of a violin string. If it's too weak, you're not going to get any kind of sound out of it. But if it's too tight, it's not going to sound right. But that there needs to be a certain amount of tension that's just right. And so one of the themes that I'd like to develop throughout our practice is that discernment of what is just right, what is just enough effort for me in this pose. That just right is being aware that that's not going to the extremes on either end. It's finding the center, being aware of that center, and knowing that you can begin to trust yourself. You know where that center is, and you're getting closer to it with every pose, with every breath, every time you practice. Becoming more and more in balance from the inside. And only then can we really begin to balance through our bodies and our muscles, is when we connect the mind to the body in that way. So let's begin our practice in our child pose. A little bit of a warm-up here, as we can lengthen our spine and grow our fingers out as far ahead of us as they can go. Our hips sink between the heels. We can take a deep breath of air and notice how the breath feels in this pose. Maybe hollowing out the armpits, coming up onto the fingertips. Let's walk our fingers off to the right. Feel the left side body open up, a little bit of a crescent. Feeling those armpits hollow out, noticing the energy from the tips of the fingers flowing down all the way through the side body, all the way down to the toes on that left side. And we'll walk our fingers off to the left. Tenting those fingers up, the palms off the mat. And with each breath of air, you're kind of scanning the body from the fingertips all the way down through the side of the shoulder, the side body, and the hip, all the way down to the toes. We're going to come back to center, tuck our toes behind us, and find our first downward facing dog. Pedaling out the feet. Raising our tailbone up above us, wearing those shoulder blades behind the ears. And let's inch by inch, let's step our feet forwards, coming into our forward fold. Maybe grabbing our elbows or ragdoll, swinging to the left and to the right. Releasing the elbows, rising up vertebrae by vertebrae. Finding ourselves standing mountain pose. Let's find our form here, find ourselves reaching up through the top of the head, standing really tall. We're going to do a couple classical sun salutations as our warm-up before the moon salutation today. We have to stand very tall and find our balance on both feet. Find where the weight, the center of gravity is. We can shift that from one foot to the other. And then raise the right knee into the chest. Lifting it up as high as you can. Finding our steadiness. Push the hands forward. Push the foot out. And then as slowly as possible, we're going to step back in the hands to the heart. Stepping that right foot all the way back and bringing that right knee down to the mat for Anjaneyasana. Bringing the hands to the hips and squaring those hips. So we're pushing the left hip down and the right hip up. Opening the heart. The shoulders pull down towards the hips. We'll start in the preparatory position with the fingers reaching for the ground beneath us and still lifting up through the top of the head. So the shoulders are pulling down and the back muscles are engaged, but the spine is still long. We'll come down to frame the foot, lifting the back knee and stepping the left foot back into a high plank. Bringing our knees, chest, and chin to the mat. Ashtanga Mudra. Wagging the tail. Loosening up the lower back. And then pulling the heart through into our cobra or up dog. And pushing back into our downward facing dog. Pedaling out the feet. Looking at your belly button as you raise the tailbone as high as you can. We're going to raise the right foot out behind us. Step that foot forward between the hands, finding our Anjaneyasana on this side. The hips square. Shoulders, activating those back muscles, going down towards the hips. And our hands reach for the mat beneath us, keeping the core engaged as we lengthen the spine. Taking a breath and noticing how it feels to breathe in this pose. How that's a little different from any other pose. Just being fully aware of the entire body and each motion as we come down to frame the foot. Lifting the back knee off of the mat and lifting the back foot up into our standing split. Maybe bringing our hands to the heart, casting our balance as we bring the knee up into a standing balance, slowly as possible. Hands push out, foot kicks out, We'll bring our feet together. We're going to come to the center of our mats. We should be a little bit warmed up, a little bit loosened up, and ready to begin the moon salutation. There was a beautiful full moon out last night, if anybody saw it, that sort of inspired this practice. Starting with Indolendasana, so you reach, for our mountain pose, you reach up, growing as high as you can, as much height as you have, the palms flat to the wall in front of us. We're going to take the right hand, grab the outside of the left palm, and fold out to the right, keeping the side body engaged. Exhale up to the side, inhaling back up to center, flipping the grip. I'm going to try the other side. Coming back up to center, flipping the grip again so the right hand grabs the left palm, and this time we're going to raise the right foot out to the side, testing our balance here as we push out through the heel, work those adductors on the side, and fold in the direction of the leg. Keeping the obliques engaged, keeping the back muscles strong, lifting ourselves back up to center, feet back together. Let's flip our grip. This time, raise the left foot out to the left. Find the steady balance. And on the exhale, fold to the left. Finding that full crescent. Inhaling back up to center, reaching up. Let's bring our hands to our heart for a moment. Release the shoulders. Bring those shoulders down towards the hips. We're going to bring our hands all the way up. One more time, the right hand grabs the left palm. And this time, the left foot raises out as you fold to the right. Let's bring our arms out to a T. And we're going to touch into a half moon pose. You can also have your foot about 45 degrees here. I should have mentioned that a moment ago. So if we can touch into our half moon and use those side muscles to lift it up. And find a wide-legged, about twice hip distance apart, with our hands above our heads. We're going to touch that on the other side, so the left foot can be about 45 degrees. As you fold to the left, lift that right foot up off the mat. Our arms come out to a T. You can touch the Ardha Chandrasana. Coming back up into our wide-legged squat. The shoulders come onto the back. The knees bend. Wide-legged chair pose here. Opening the heart. Keeping the ribs pulled in to the core. And giving ourselves a couple bounces here. Noticing how it feels to breathe in the squat. And let's expand tall, expanding in all directions. The 5-pointed star. How big can you make yourself? Can you grow a little bit taller, just another inch? And we'll find the cactus arms and take the squat. Squat just a little bit deeper than before. Everything pulling in. Your feet are pulling in. Your shoulder blades are pulling into the back. The top of your head is lifting up, but otherwise everything else is pulling into the core. How low can you go? You're going to lift up. One more 5-pointed star, expanding. And let's bring our legs a little bit wider. Hands to our hips. We're going to try our Prasarta Padottanasana, the wide-legged forward fold. We'll bring our hands down to the mat, release the neck,
Release the jaw. Let yourself just melt into the fold for a moment. Raising the tailbone out behind you. Taking a particularly rewarding breath. And we can bring our hands to our hips and rise back up. This time, binding the hands behind our backs as we open the heart and look up. Trying to see the outsides of the feet, squeezing those in as we fold forward, with the hands bound behind the back, keeping the back flat. Let's bow. Reaching your head for that space just between the heels. Finding your solid stability in this pose as you squeeze those feet together. Let's release the bind. Bring our hands to grab each foot and grabbing each toe and bending the arms as you pull the heart for that space between the heels. Deepening your fold on the exhale. And inhaling as we walk our hands up, lengthening the spine. We're going to put our right toes faced forwards and windmill up into a warrior two, bending into that knee, opening the heart, arms long, shoulder blades onto the back. Finding the pose with the feet, pulling the feet together, and then straightening that front leg. We're going to find our Trikonasana, triangle pose. So here you want to try to have the arm in a straight line. It's easy to try to reach it forwards or backwards. Try to keep it straight, stacked directly on top of the shoulder. Pulling the outside of that back foot in to the front heel. And feeling the top of the core here strong. Taking a moment, working on straightening that front leg. And then we'll bring both of our hands down to the inside of that foot. Let's stagger our feet about hip distance apart with the back foot about 45 degrees forwards. Coming up into our pyramid pose. Vertical Tadasana. Here you can try a reverse namaste, or you can grab your elbows, or just find the hands behind the back, whichever is better for your practice. When you find that, keep the back flat. Keep those hips so that you're pulling the left hip forward and the right hip back. Maybe shortening your stance a little wide like mine. Finding the foundation, and then the hips squared, and then bow until your back is parallel to the mat. I'm going to hold here for a few moments. Lengthening the spine. Breathing all the way in the lower back. And then rising back up. Bring our hands to our heart. Bending into that front knee. Folding forwards. Hands come to the inside of that foot. The back knee comes down to the mat, the back toenails down to the mat. Anjane Asana, the low lunge. We're going to square the hips here. Bringing the shoulders down towards the hips. This time reaching up tall. And adding a crescent, so the right hand grabs the outside of the left hand. And you fold, exhale off to the right. And back to center. Flipping the grip. Lengthening the spine on the inhale and exhaling into the side body fold. Coming back to center. And we're going to bring our hands down to the inside of that foot. Maybe bringing the back leg a little further back for our lizard lunge. So you can stay here on the hands or come all the way down to the forearms. You like to open those hips. I like to come onto the knife edge, the pinky toe edge of that front foot. To get a little bit of a pigeon action here and do some little hip circles. You lift the back knee, really get into those hip circles. Breathing all the way into that right hip. Finding just enough effort that fits your practice. Don't push yourself to go all the way. You never need to go as far as I do, just coming all the way up here is fine too. So let's bring that back knee back down to the mat. We're going to bring, we're going to bring the right knee down to the right side and come on the outside of the left foot for the gatekeeper's pose. This is a modification to avoid the crouching tiger, which is always a bit difficult on the knees. But here, we can really work on that side body. Adding that side body fold. Maybe reaching for those toes. Bringing our hands back to our heart, down to the mat. Let's come onto the toes and step, hop, or float into our Malasana squat, however you'd like to get there. So here for Malasana, we want to lengthen the spine, sit tall. Don't let the side body collapse. We're lengthening that, we're growing. This is a class about growth. Let's bind the left arm around the left leg and the right hand behind the back and see if you can reach them together, opening that shoulder up. And exhaling into our release. Bring our hands to heart, squeezing those knees into the triceps, and then wrapping that right arm around the right leg. Adding the Malasana bind on this side. When those hips and shoulders feel open and balanced, you can either stay in the Malasana squat if that's better for you, or take a moment in crow if you would like. We always like our crow pose. Finding a moment just to balance, to find stability here, nothing fancy. And setting those toes down to the mat. We will be back. Just finding that stability there. And we're going to bring that left knee down to the mat. And the right foot comes out long for the gatekeeper's pose. Working our way back up on this side. Raising our hands as high as they go. Expanding, lifting, lengthening the spine. And feeling that left side body grow as we fold over to the right. Keeping that shoulder behind the back of the earlobe. Breathing into the left kidney and not letting the right side body collapse here. Keeping it all strong and engaged with muscle as we pull ourselves back up. We're going to bring our hands down in front of us. Come onto that left foot. Pivot towards the back of the mat. The back knee comes down. Taking our lizard lunge on this side. Feeling those hips open up. Maybe coming onto the knife edge of that left foot. Whichever variation works for you on the other side. Make it symmetric here. I like to do these little hula hoop circles. Feel that hip really open up. Breathing all the way into the lower back. Back knee comes down to the mat. Coming back onto our hands. And we're going to find our Anjaneyasana. Our hips square. Our shoulders pulling down towards the hips and onto the back. And then we reach. Grow tall, adding the side body stretches. You should feel very long in the side body by now. Finding that on each side. And growing tall. Holding forwards with our hands on the inside of the foot. We're going to lift that back knee up off the mat. Finding a little bit of a shorten, maybe 3 times our hip width apart. Squaring the hips, finding our pyramid pose, maybe with the reverse namaste, maybe grabbing the elbows, whichever variation you used before. Keeping those elbows opening up, straightening that front leg, squaring those hips, and bow. We're going to hold here in Parsvottanasana. Finding those hips, pulling those feet inwards together. Trying to keep the back as flat as possible and parallel to the ground. You should be able to place a glass of water beneath your shoulder blades. And it should be level. Let's release those hands, coming up tall, finding our warrior two, expanding the arms as far apart from one another as they will go. Maybe their wingspan has grown a little bit through all this stretching. That's good. That will help our form as we straighten that front knee and find Trikonasana, the triangle pose. Looking up at the top hand and stack those hands on top of one another. Pulling that front hip back just a little bit so you're squeezing both feet together. Feeling strong from the foundation. We're going to bring both hands down to the inside of the foot. Walk it between the hands, spinning both feet forwards. Prasarta Tadasana. This time, feeling much more open, much more awake. Feels easier to balance a little bit more weight onto the hands. And as you find that, maybe you can come up onto your toes. Maybe walking the hands behind you a little bit further. Coming onto those toes. Maybe we can make a little shelf with our chaturanga arms and lift one leg off the mat. Or half firefly. There we go. And put that foot back down. Lift the tailbone all the way up again. Find those chaturanga arms. Make that shelf. And lift the other leg off the mat. Putting that back down. Lifting the tailbone. Walking our hands back forwards. Bringing our hands to our hips. And rising up tall. Reaching our hands above our heads. Finding our cactus arms and our goddess squat. And sinking low. Those hips are open now. It feels much easier to go a little bit deeper with maybe a little bit wider legs. And then we can expand in all directions. And let's wiggle our feet until they're just a little more than hip distance apart. Finding our Indolindasana as we exhale and fold to the right. And then exhale and fold to the left. Coming back up to center. Finding the weight onto the left foot. Raising the right foot as high as it'll go. Holding off to the right. Bringing that foot back down, flipping the grip. Lifting the left foot and folding off to the left. Reaching our hands overhead. Hands down to the heart. That was our moon salutation. Let's take a moment because now we have to go back around the other way. Traditionally, you always do two moon salutations, one starting to the right and one starting to the left. Let's take this moment, kind of shake it out. We're going to try to move a little bit slower with our side body folding into the moon this time. So we're going to take the left hand, grab the outside of the right, fold off to the left, put the weight onto that left foot, and lift the right foot up and off the mat. Bring our arms out into a T, and very slowly, using all your core, find the half moon. We're here, we're opening our heart, we're pushing out through that back heel, lifting that foot as high as we can, looking at the hand overhead, keeping the core strong, the spine long. Maybe lifting those fingertips off the ground. Coming back up. I'm going to try this on the other side. Finding the weight onto the right foot as we fold to the right, lifting the left heel up off the mat. Arms come out into a T, and very slowly, very controlled, bringing those fingertips down to the mat, opening the heart, raising that back heel, Ardha Chandrasana. Keeping that energy pushing out through the heel and feeling that energy flow through the back of the leg, all the way through the lower back and the shoulder, and out the top of the head. Using that line as kind of a center of balance as we pick ourselves up. And find our wide-legged squat. So from here, those shoulders are pulling down to the hips. Let's see if we can keep our knees just above the heels as we pull the feet together and sink a little bit deeper, giving ourselves a little bounce, a little dance. And then growing tall, finding the five-pointed star, opening the heart, feeling taller. Let's bring our feet a little bit wider. Our hands come to our hips as we bow. Taking a few moments here just to breathe. Noticing how the breath may have changed since the start of practice. Noticing how good it feels to fill the body with air. Let's take a deep inhale. And as we exhale, walking the fingers all the way over to the right to frame that right foot. And those feet pulling them inwards and together and lifting that tailbone as much as we can. Keeping the body, the hips symmetric between the feet as we lengthen the arms through the legs all the way up to the side. And we'll walk our hands back to center. And we'll walk our hands over to the left side. Framing the foot. Trying to keep those hips symmetric. A little bit of a twist in that right side body. And then we'll walk our hands back to center. Maybe bringing the hands a little bit further behind us. Creating a little bit of a chaturanga shelf. Those chaturanga arms just a little more than shoulder width apart. See if we can come onto both toes. You can bend the knees a little bit here. It helps. Unless you're super, super flexible. See if we can find a little bit of our firefly pose. Maybe one foot, maybe the other foot, maybe both feet. Titipasana. Either way, we're just trying to put as much of that strength into our hands as we can. And find a place that's stable for you. When we've had the moment to play with that, we're going to walk our hands over to the left side, spinning that left foot forward, bending the knee up just above the heel. Cartwheeling the hands up into our warrior two on the left side. This time, squaring the hips, bringing that back foot about 45 degrees, the feet about hip distance apart. Squaring the hips, keeping that knee a little bit bent. We're going to take a bound warrior pose here. Bring the shoulder to the inside of the knee. Trying to pull those feet together. Square those hips, pushing the shoulder into the inside of the left thigh. And the thigh pushes into the shoulder. Releasing those hands down to that inside of that foot. Wiggling the foot out just a little bit further, getting ready for our pyramid pose. So, trying to straighten this front knee, lifting up, adding our reverse namaste, or grabbing the elbows, whichever variation works. Squeezing those feet together. And keeping our hands here behind our back. We bend that back knee down to the mat. Finding our Anjaneyasana. This time with the hands bound, so we can add a little bit more of a back bend. Breathing the heart open on each exhale. back to center. Bring our hands to frame the front foot. Bring that back leg a little further back. Here we're going to find our Ardha Hanumanasana. So here's where I'm going to use the blocks. The half splits. This is definitely a pose where you don't need to push yourself to find the full aesthetic as much as your bigger focus should be keeping the hips square and keeping the spine long. Finding that half split. Trying to pull that right hip forwards and pointing the toe. Breathing here feels a little bit different. Just be aware of how it feels. And those shoulder blades on back. Get rid of the blocks. And bring the hands down to the inside of the foot. Taking our moment in our lizard. Letting those hips sway from side to side. We're going to come back up. Find that this time you can either take the gatekeeper's pose or the full crouching tiger, if you prefer. Crouching tigers, the knee just above the heel, like this, with the leg long. You're squeezing the feet together, you're lengthening the spine. Trying to get as low as you can. Hands to the heart, feeling the stability, feeling the balance. We bring our hands down to the inside of that foot. Find our weight onto our hands. Maybe lifting that knee, that foot off the mat. See if you can jump to the center of the mat. However you need to get there, that is good. We are in our Malasana. I told you we would be back here. So here this time, we're going to find our crow. From the fingertips, keeping the hands about just a little more than shoulder width apart. The weight behind the knuckles and the pad of the thumb really helps with the balance, and then your fingers are like your micro adjustments with the balance. Let's find our weight on our toes, and the more that you put the center of gravity a little bit more forwards, the easier it is to find the balance. And it takes less strength the closer into balance that you are. It's a very powerful point. But if you're perfectly balanced, it really doesn't take very much strength. It's when you're out of balance that you really have to muscle your way into it. So let's find our crow pose and hold it for as long as works for you. Setting it down. Taking a moment if you'd like another try at it. Go ahead if you'd like to work the Malasana binds, that works for you too. So I really like these. This is like one of my favorite binds, just because I feel like it gets into the shoulder and really somewhere in like the upper back side of the shoulder. A lot of other binds don't always get to. Up from here. Find our hands back, ready for another momentary crow, and see if we can just jump that leg into the crouching tiger. However you need to get there. We're going to find our crouching tiger or gatekeeper's pose if that's easier on the knees for you. Crouching tiger, trying to keep that hip a little bit low. Keeping this leg really straight, parallel to the side of the mat. You're squeezing the feet together. We're finding our balance, finding our strength in the leg. And we'll bring our hands down to the inside of that foot. Spinning both of our feet forwards. Taking a moment in the lizard lunge. Giving the hips another sway each way. Before we come onto the hands and take our Ardha Hanumanasana. Again, only pushing yourself to where it feels just right. Trying not to go too far into either side of the extremes, finding a balance in the middle of what works for your practice. Squaring those hips, pointing the toe, lengthening the spine. Definitely a good pose to breathe through. Noticing the breath coming in. Notice how the breath affects every cell in the body. It feels good to breathe all the way down to the toes from the Ardha Hanumanasana. Let's get rid of those blocks. Bring the hands to the inside of the foot, bring that foot in just a little bit. We're going to get ready for our Anjaneyasana. Bring those hips square, finding the hands behind the back. Looking up, opening the heart. And exhaling into the back bend, reaching for the heel behind you. Exhaling back up to center. Let's bring our hands down to frame the foot. Lift that back knee off the mat and feet a little bit closer together. Straight legs. Tall with the back. Finding our whichever bind worked for the pyramid pose as we bow. Feeling the center of gravity directly between the feet as you pull those feet inwards. Shoulders pulling down to the hips. Rising up tall. Bending into the knee, finding the hands behind the back, opposite finger on top for our bound warrior pose. Always need a little humble warrior to make you feel a little humble to the practice. Keeping that inside of the right leg pushing into the shoulder, pulling those feet, the back foot pulls forwards, and the abs feel strong. You don't let that right side body collapse. The obliques are firing up here, using those abs to pick yourself up. And find our warrior two, your Kondrasana two. And the back muscles engage onto the shoulders. Straightening the feet, pointing the feet forwards. We're going to bow. Prasarta Paratadasana. We'll give one more go at the firefly pose. Take any variation of Prasarta Paratadasana that works for you. Straightening the legs, grabbing the toe hook on each foot. Hands to the hips, lower back. As we rise up tall, wiggling the feet inwards a little bit, bending the knee. We're gonna take our goddess squat, mother squat. Never forget the chair poses. Letting ourselves sink low, feeling strong the lower we sink. And then rising up tall into our 5-pointed star, expanding, growing, using all the length in the side body that we found today. We're gonna bend the knees, find one more cactus arm, one more goddess squat. This time sinking a bit lower, a bit lower. And then rising up, reaching our hands straight above us. The right hand grabs the left palm. We exhale off to the right. Inhaling back to center, flipping the grip, and exhaling off to the left. Inhaling back to center. Let's bring our hands to our heart. Wiggle our feet in. Taking a moment. Notice how it feels to breathe in the mountain pose. Noticing the heart beating. Noticing the blood flowing through every muscle we've worked today. And let our arms drop to our sides. Let's take a little windmill. Loosening it up. Letting the arms come to a pause at their own pace. Letting the body find a standing stillness. When we are still, let's take that stillness with us as we come to sit or lay, finding a moment to give ourselves a little bit of a hug, hugging the knees into the chest, rocking side to side. Grabbing the outsides of the feet, we keep the tailbone rooted to the mat. Finding our happy baby pose. Then I'm going to bring the knees together. Support the lower back as we find the hide the ears pose. Taking one last forward fold to release any tension in the upper back. And we can slowly roll the spine from left to right. And release any tension left. As we roll ourselves out long for our Savasana. Taking this moment, give yourself a particularly rewarding breath of air. Breathing in a way that gives your body comfort. Exactly what you need in this moment, in this practice. Finding your mind
closer to the center of balance with every breath of air. Noticing the stillness between each breath. The warmth within us. The coolness of the air on our skin. Feel the solid, stable ground beneath you. Let the mind come to a pause as the ripples on the waters still. Noticing how effortless it can be to balance in this pose here and now, to balance the mind with each breath of air, feeling totally present, completely fulfilled, growing stronger, growing more aware with every passing moment. And knowing that this sense of peace and balance is yours, and you can take it with you wherever you go throughout your day, throughout your week, is here, and it comes from within, and you always have it with you. You can begin to wiggle the fingers and the toes, bring that awareness into the body, and the knees, into your chest, giving yourself a hug as you roll over onto the right side body. And push yourself up into a seated position. With your hands at your hearts. I am so glad that you each joined me in this practice today. The love and light in me honors the love and light in you. You should be proud of yourselves for sticking through this one today. It was very wonderful to practice with you all. Namaste.